This is the Janome Mod 30 sewing machine, and I picked this out for a beginner sewing machine. The price point is around $250, and Janome is a really good brand. There are other options for less money, but I have liked almost all of my Janome sewing machines, and the one I did not like was a very, very expensive one. Other than that, I have really appreciated the consistency of their products and wanted to try this out to be a recommendation for a beginner sewist. I feel like this machine could go farther than potentially a cheap Singer machine. Maybe not, but I think the quality is going to be there. So I'm going to get it set up with you all. So far, I've just plugged it in and put the pedal on. There is a pedal that hooks in to the side, and this is what you press to sew. And then there's a cord that hooks into the side for the power, and the power switch is over here as well. I'm just going to turn it a little bit so you can see that. Pedal, power, on and off button. So I picked this machine because it had some features that some other Janome machines that were slightly cheaper did not have, but it also has less stitches. So it only has 30 stitches, which is why it's called the Mod 30. And at least 10 of those are decorative stitches, which to me aren't super necessary if you're just quilting. If you are quilting, a straight stitch is what you need, potentially a zigzag stitch, and that's pretty much it. This does also have the capacity to do a few stitches for knit, a blind hem stitch, buttonholes if you move on to clothing or anything like that. So it does have more capability than just a straight stitch machine. What it comes with is an instruction manual. We have a dust jacket that goes over the machine when not in use. You could put it on and leave it plugged in, or unplug the cords and wrap them up and put them in the middle. It also has a slit for the handle to come through. It comes with a few other things like all Janome machines do. It has a presser foot already on it, but it's just a basic straight stitch. This is an additional option for holding your thread. These are additional little caps for once your thread is on. I have some RFL thread right here and I'm putting it on, but because the Janome spool holder is sideways, you want to make sure that you put a little cap on. I like to use these little guys for the RFL because this cone shape can go inside the cone. It just holds them on so they don't move off. And it comes with quite a few actually, which is awesome. So those are all for spool thread holding. This is just for cleaning dust out of here or underneath. Janome machines almost always come with a seam ripper. It has a couple other feet that I'm sure the manual will tell us what those are for, and it comes with a few bobbins. Now, I would recommend buying more bobbins. 3 bobbins is not going to be enough. I like to fill 10 bobbins at once, so I have them all ready to go. This is a little, basically a screwdriver to unscrew those when you have to get underneath there. And it comes with some needles. It came with organ needles, which I'll be interested to see if this machine takes those. I prefer Janome needles for Janome machines. This is a blue tip, which is really great for quilting. I also purchased an aftermarket 1/4-inch foot with guide. And you just have to make sure when you're purchasing one of these that it works with the brand that you own. I also purchased a magnetic seam guide, and this just magnetizes to the faceplate here. Now, a lot of this faceplate is plastic. There's a little bit of non-plastic, so we'll have to see what that does. And then this just kind of lets the fabric glide underneath of it. So we'll test that out. So I'm going to sit down and move the camera a little bit, and we're going to thread the machine, wind a bobbin, and see what is what with the stitches. On a sewing machine, you have a wheel to the right where you can manually move your needle up and down when you turn it. So if for any reason your needle gets stuck in the down position, that's a good thing to know. It's always good to read through your manual, at least the basics, to understand what everything is. What I want to learn right now is how to wind a bobbin, 14 through 16. Once you kind of get the hang of sewing machines, they're all going to have a very similar vibe. And if you stick with the same brand, you are going to really have the same vibe for threading and all of that stuff. So for threading through to go to the needle, you have these numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's little lines with arrows. Most machines will have something like that if you don't have a manual. So you have a machine from a cousin or an aunt and you can't find a manual. I would suggest looking online on the manufacturer's website. A lot of them have manuals. And if not, that's a good way to know. Usually a machine will have some sort of indicator of where the thread goes. Now right by the bobbin, because I'm winding a bobbin right now, it actually tells me what to do for the bobbin. We want to come off the spool and go in this little silver thing instead of around the back of the white. And we want to put our bobbin on this. And then we are going to push this towards this, and it's going to wind our bobbin for us. Actually, it looks like we might have to push the foot too. There we go. Sometimes you have to play around with it a little bit. Some of my machines start automatically when you push it towards the side, and some, like this one, you have to push the foot. So we are getting caught a little bit. I'm not sure. Let's try that. Let's try putting this on the other way and see if that makes a difference. Apparently it did. So the main thing I watch as your bobbin winds is that it is evenly winding. Usually it will even itself out, but if it's not, you can kind of hold the thread to one section to fill that up so it evens out a little bit. They're pretty good about evening out themselves. Also, this little stopper over here has a screw on top, so you can move it, and that will help you adjust how full the bobbin gets. You don't want it to be too full, but also sometimes they don't full it as full as it could be. Once your bobbin is full, it will stop winding on its own. Then you push the bobbin back in and you can clip it apart. The instructions will tell you how to put it into your, where the bobbin goes under here, the bobbin holder. The biggest thing you want to make sure of is that your thread is moving in the right direction. Oh, look, there was a bobbin in there too. Your thread is going in the correct direction that the instructions tell you. I'm over here on the manual, because that will make a huge difference in your machine working properly. Usually you have to pull your thread over a little hook. There's a little dip here and an arrow, and pull it back. That's for Janome machines. Not all machines may have that, but all of my Janome machines do. I am now going to take my thread and I am going to thread it through the machine So I see my number 4 is up here, but my hook isn't. So I want to make sure I'm getting it on the hook. There's usually a slot. And then I'm going to thread my needle. There is an automatic needle threader on this machine. I'm not a big fan of them, but they do work if you use them and figure out how to use them. After you get the needle threaded from front to back, you're going to put your thread under your foot and you're going to push the up down button. This is one of the reasons I liked this machine. It has a button where you can put your needle in the down position or the up position. So you're going to push it once and it's going to go down, and you're going to keep tension. You're going to push it again, and then you're going to pull that thread out from the bobbin into the sewing space. We're going to put our little cap back on, and our machine is all threaded and ready to sew with. I'm going to move these guys to the side. This machine also comes with a button foot, and this is a good little slot where you can put some of those extra supplies, and it slides back on. This is also a good spot to notice on this machine. This is where you turn your feed dogs up and down with your screwdriver tool. Your feed dogs are these little treads almost underneath where your presser foot is, and they help feed the fabric through. So an instance where you would not want those feed dogs to be up is if you're free motion quilting, because you want to move the fabric. You don't want the machine to move the fabric. We don't do anything else with them. I've never used them or put them up or down for anything else personally, but that's where that is. And then this whole plate will come off. There's a couple screws there, and you can get underneath the carriage to clean it out. I would recommend doing that maybe after every big project. You want to clean all the lint out, clean out lint in your bobbin case, dust it off. A machine like this, you should never have to oil. You have to oil industrial sewing machines, but this sort of a machine, you should never have to oil. And then I would recommend getting your machine serviced every year or two, depending on how much you use it. That would be taking it to a local quilt shop, a sew-and-vac shop, and there'll be people that will give it a tune-up, make sure all the stitching and timing is correct. Okay, so I have a scrap piece of fabric here. I want to see what the stitches look like. And I'm going to double up this fabric because typically I'm sewing a seam with 2 pieces of fabric together. So I want to get an accurate depiction of what my stitches are going to look like. Let's go over a few things. This is the back stitch button for this machine. It is how you backstitch. You still have to push the foot, I assume. Most machines of this level, you push the button and push the foot at the same time, and it moves your stitches backwards instead of forwards. There's a start-stop button, so if you have trouble with the foot pedal, or you have a really long stretch of straight stitching that you want to do, you could just start it and it will sew without pushing the foot pedal, and you push stop again to stop it. This is the speed, so really slow, medium is in the middle, and all the way fast. This is the tension, and it's, you probably don't want to mess with this. Read about it in your manual. If your stitches don't look even on the bottom or top, that might be a spot that you work with on your tension to get those correct, and your manual will tell you what to do depending on if your stitches are looser on the bottom or looser on the top. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is the button to change the, okay, so that we can plus or minus the numbers to know what stitch we're using. We want it to be on the 0, 0 because that's a straight stitch. This is the width of a zigzag. So you won't have to really know about that for a straight stitch, but for a zigzag, it denotes the width of how far apart the points of the zigzag are. And the last one looks like the stitch length, which is set to 2.4. I typically like to sew with a 2.0 on quilting in the piecing. The last button is this. It's a lock stitch. So the difference between a back stitch and a lock stitch is the lock stitch, if you push it and then push your petal, your needle will go up and down in the same place a couple times and create kind of a knot on the back of the fabric. A back stitch actually moves however far back. It moves the fabric back instead of forward, and you can do a back stitch as long as you want to. You control the length and then you come back forward. They essentially do the same thing. I don't typically use the lock stitch. I grew up using a back stitch. I feel like the lock stitch is a newer thing, but you can practice and see what you prefer. Let's give this machine a spin. So I am using a lever that's underneath and on the back to lower my presser foot. And a lot of machines that are higher quality, once you start sewing, will sew and stop with the needle in the needle down position. I don't know what this one does. Let's take a peek. So it stops with the needle in the needle up position, which is one reason why I like the needle down position. You can stop and not have any shifting of fabric. And it still does not have the needle stop in the needle down position, so you'd have to put it back in the needle down. But it's a good thing to do when you're stopping so that this can't be, even if the foot is up, it can't be yanked out of place. For pivoting, that's a really great place that I like the needle down position if you have to sew a corner. Okay, so let's lift this up, pull out the threads. Usually there's a little cutter on the side of a machine that you can cut your threads with. It does waste a little bit more thread, so that's something to consider. My stitches look really great. Now the 2 stitch length is really small on this machine. I'm actually going to try the 2.2. So play around with that. You don't want them so small that they're a real pain to pick out, but you want them small enough that after you sew something, you aren't going to have it unravel for a while, because we don't want to use the back stitches often because it makes a thicker seam line. But a back stitch, I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to push the back stitch button. Now my fabric's going backwards. I let it go and it comes forward. I am used to a cut button, so that is what I keep reaching for to do. If you have the money to get a nicer machine, one thing I would really recommend is one with a stitch, like a cut button. And what it does is after you stop sewing, you can push the button and it'll cut your threads close underneath for you. And the Juki machine actually has a button on your foot pedal. So you push with your toes to sew, and then you push the front of the pedal with your heel to cut the stitches. It's kind of amazing. Okay, so the stitches are actually really nice in my opinion on this machine. It has a nice sound to it. I do feel like the stitches are slightly smaller than the machines that I've been working with for the past couple of years. So just play around with what is most comfortable for you. One thing we're gonna figure out, okay, there it is. So there's a little push button on the back of the presser foot. It's black and it has a spring to it. If you push that, your little feet will come off and you can switch feet to any of the other feet. I'm gonna put on the 1/4 inch foot that I got. See if it fits. So you can see this has a guide, and so from the needle to the guide should be exactly 1/4 inch, and that guide is a nice little bump for your fabric to bump up against. And in order to put this foot on, I am just actually going to put it underneath where it clips in and then lower my presser foot onto it, and the force of lowering it will click it in. This is a little bit more precise. Let's make sure. So this actually won't work with this machine. Let's try So there's no way to move the needle over. And this foot has a very precise spot for the needle to go down into, and the needle is too far over to the side. So this won't actually work for this machine. So I won't be recommending that. That's good to know. It is always good to make sure that when you're looking for an aftermarket foot, you find one that mentions the specific machine you have. You can get a 1/4 inch foot that is Janome brand and should work on all of their machines. This is a nice foot. So what I'm gonna do for a 1/4 inch foot on this is I'm going to use, probably let's try the white, the clear, just because then I can see the fabric through. So there is actually tape you can buy that does this and has a 1/4 inch. Okay, this line right here is actually where my 1/4 inch is. So I'm gonna cut some washi tape and try and line it up really well with that mark. Let's see what we can do there. So that seems to be pretty dead on. I am not going to let the tape go under my presser foot because of the feed dog. So I'm going to go right up to that presser foot. And that's going to be the line that I guide my 1/4 inch seam allowance for. So let's try it. I don't have necessarily a perfect cut edge, but because I use different machines, so see how I'm keeping this edge right along the edge of the tape, and that's going to give me a nice 1/4 inch seam line consistently. I'm just used to buttons in different places from my other machine, so I keep reaching. So there we go. We have a 1/4 inch seam allowance now. Again, those stitches look great. So I highly recommend reading through your manual and finding out as much information about your machine. Again, if you ever have tension problems with the stitches on the bottom or the top of your fabric being looser, your manual will help you. If something breaks, your manual will help you, showing you how to do the automatic threader or replace the needle. It's all in your manual. So all in all, I would say this is a really great beginner sewing machine with a lot of things that are helpful for you. Let's do one quick thing and see if the magnetic, oh, so it is magnetic here, even though it's not, doesn't show as magnetic. So the trick with this is we don't want to run into the foot. So let's grab our fabric and try with the guide here and see what that does for us. Now we want our fabric to go under this little foot without it holding on or grabbing it too much. So we might have to lift that up a little bit. So that's not too bad. I would say it could definitely work, and it's easily removable, which is awesome. So that could be a really handy thing to use for a guide instead of tape if the tape isn't working for you. You can also look at a Janome retailer and find a 1/4 inch foot. The only thing is with a 1/4 inch foot with a guide, you do have to take it off and swap it out for a different foot when you're doing the stitch and flip method or HSTs, because that guide will get in the way. I am going to leave you at that. I think this is a great beginner machine. I think the stitches are nice, and even though it's $250 is a little bit higher of a price point, I know you can get machines for in the $100 to $150 range. I feel confident that this machine would last you longer than those, and I recommend it.